الحمد لله نحمده حق حمده ونشكره شكرا لا ينبغي لأحد من بعده ونستعينه استعانة الموقنين بصدق وعده ونستغفره ونتوب إليه توبة تطفئ غضبه وترضيه عن عبده ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وترحم وتحنن على عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه الطيبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
What is the procedure? They going to read?
Whatever you desire.
Who's the no reading class?
Rahman.
Rahman read. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. باب قول الله تعالى ونضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة وأن أعمال بني آدم وقولهم يوزن. وقال مجاهد القسطاس العدل بالرميات ويقال القسط مصدر المقسط وهو العادل وأما القاسط فهو الجائر. وبسند المتصل منا إلى الإمام الهمامي رحمه الله قال حدثنا أحمد بن إشهاب قال حدثنا محمد بن فضيل عن عمارة بن القعقاع عن أبي زرعة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كلمتان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم.
At the beginning of the hadith, the student reads بسند المتصل منا إلى الإمام البخاري. And there are two occasions when that entire sanad deserves to be read. When the kitab is started and when the kitab is ended. For the rest of it, for all the other 8,000 hadith in between, you can shorten and say whatever that sanad happens to be, what that sanad means recite from Imam Bukhari. What that means is that between ourselves and Imam Bukhari, rahmatullahi alayhi, no. Between ourselves and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there is a human chain. These words, كلمتان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم, was spoken by the beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Those words that echoed down the centuries, 14 centuries, there's a human chain that handed down person to person. An uninterrupted chain of students receiving it from teacher passing on to the next student. And in this way it has come down to what we are sitting and doing here now, completing the final hadith. But there is something very symbolic about it. Why has the reading of the final hadith of Bukhari become the occasion, the ceremony through which students are deemed to pass from the stage of being students to the stage of now being graduates? Why this specific book? Because this religion of ours, this deen of ours, essentially is based upon two pillars which is strange to none of us. There's the Quran and there's the Sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam left behind the Quran and then he left behind his hadith. As far as the Quran is concerned, whether we realize it or not, all of us have received that Quran with the exact same type of human chain. You might have learned it by some mudarris, some hafiz, some khalifa in Cape Town, who learned it from someone, who learned it from someone, who learned it from someone, all the way back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But that has become so mass transmitted. Quran is transmitted in such a broad fashion that there is no need to mention each and every person in that. All of us share, the entire ummah share that isnad. That chain of narration, all of us share it. The child who started learning from Alif Ba Ta till he finished the tilawah of the Quran, and the Hafiz and the Qari who learned the Qira'at Sab'a and Ashra, all of them have an isnad. Hadith is different. Hadith predominantly is transmitted one-on-one. The Sahabi transmits to the Tabi'i, he transmits to the one below him, and then it comes one by one down to the rest of us. So at an occasion such as this, I say that those people who were responsible for handing down that isnad to us, handing down to us the words of our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, their names deserve to be mentioned in a majlis such as this one here. A convention has set in over the years. The convention is that we make oblique reference to it. We say we have a chain. And because years have gone by, we say we have a chain, but we don't know what the chain is. So it's become virtually forgotten. At an occasion such as this, it behoves us therefore to mention their names and ask Allah Ta'ala to send His mercy upon them. They are deserving, each man in that chain is most deserving of us who come at the end of the chain to make dua for them that come earlier. So, this kitab has reached you through your Ustad Mawlana Naseem. Mawlana Naseem has received it from Qasim Sema. Mawlana Qasim Sema has an isnad. Now these are things which the ulama of isnad are aware of, and they don't easily share with the rest of us. But the isnad of Mawlana Qasim Sema for all the 40, 50 years that he had been teaching was one of the unique isnads in the entire world. One of the highest isnads that could be found in the entire world at that time. Maulana Rahmatullah alayhi studied in Madrasa Ta'limuddin in Dabel. And the class that he taught, rather the class that he was in, for that year that he was a student in that class only, Maulana Shabbir Ahmad Uthmani had been teaching before him. Maulana Anwar Shah Kashmiri had taught there before. That year they didn't have an Ustad, so they brought Maulana Abdul Rahman Amrohi to teach. Only that one year, and then he went away again. He taught this class only. Maulana Abdul Rahman Amrohi has a very, very special isnad. It reaches Shah Waliullah with very few links. Maulana Abdul Rahman Amrohi narrates this particular kitab from Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ganj Muradabadi. Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ganj Muradabadi transmits it directly from Shah Abdul Aziz, from Shah Waliullah. 2 links up to Shah Waliullah. Our normal isnad of Darul Uloom Deoband, after reaching, for example, my asatida would be predominantly the students of Shaykh al-Hind. Some of them the students of Shaykh al-Islam Maulana Hussain Ahmad Madani. Some of them the students of Maulana Sayyid Fakhruddin Muradabadi. Both of them, Madani and Sayyid Fakhruddin, are the students of Shaykh al-Hind. Shaykh al-Hind transmits from Maulana Qasim Nanuddin Rashid Ahmad Gangohi. Both of them from Maulana Shah Abdul Ghani Mujaddidi, from Shah Muhammad Ishaq, from Shah Abdul Aziz, from Shah Waliullah. Considerably longer. Maulana Qasim Sema returned to this country with this isnad. We didn't realize it. No one else realized it. And for years he has been handing this jewel of an isnad to his students, and they didn't realize what they have received either. Until Hazrat Maulana Qasim Sema Rahmatullah passed away. And then there was only 1 or 2 of his classmates still left. One of them was Maulana Ahmad Ali Surati from England. The Arabs got to know about Maulana Ahmad Ali Surati and his very high isnad. They flew him over all the way from the UK to Kuwait, and they got gatherings of hundreds of ulama to come to receive Sahih Bukhari. We received it, our students received it in Darul Newcastle free. You don't have to travel anywhere. We have been very fortunate in this country, and these 7 students sitting in front of me must realize what you are receiving is a great treasure. A great treasure. Here at the beginning is your Ustad, Mawlana Naseem from Mawlana Qasim Sema. At the end of this chain sits Sayyidina Sayyidul Wujud, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This gathering here, this occasion here, is tying you to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam through a chain. And you and I share in that particular chain as well. Because my Ustad had the same isnad that Mawlana Qasim Sema rahmatullahi alayhi had. So therefore, we will recite the entire chain, and as we recite name by name, we invoke Allah Ta'ala's rahmah and all. فقد حدثني بهذا الكتاب شيخنا ومولانا نصير أحمد بن عبد الشكور البرني البلندشهري شيخ الحديث بدار العلوم ديوبند، كما حدثكم شيخكم مولانا نسيم ميتا عن مولانا محمد قاسم سيما، كلاهما عن مولانا عبد الرحمن الأمروي، عن مولانا فضل الرحمن ابن أهل الله الجنج مرادبادي، عن مولانا الشيخ عبد العزيز ابن أحمد الدهلوي، عن والده الإمام المجدد قطب الدين أحمد بن عبد الرحيم الشهير بالشاه ولي الله العمري الدهلوي. So that isnad bypasses our normal chain of the ulama of Deoband. Because from Darbil it goes up to Ganj Muradabad. Therefore, we take a detour and go back to Darul Deoband because Mawlana Abdul Rahman al-Mrohwi is also the student of who? أخذ هذا الكتاب عن أستاذه مولانا أحمد حسن الأمروي عن حجة الإسلام مولانا محمد قاسم ابن أسد علي الصديقي النانوتري عن مولانا الشاه عبد الغني بن أبي سعيد المجددي الدهلوي ثم المدني عن مولانا الشاه محمد إسحاق بن محمد أفضل الدهلوي عن جده لأمه الشاه عبد العزيز عن والده الشاه ولي الله عن الشيخ أبي طاهر محمد بن إبراهيم الكردي القراني المدني عن والده الإمام المحقق شهاب الدين إبراهيم برهان الدين إبراهيم ابن حسن الكردي القراني المدني عن الشيخ صفي الدين أحمد بن محمد القشاشي المدني عن الشيخ أبي المواهب أحمد بن علي بن عبد القدوس الشناوي عن الإمام شمس الدين محمد بن أحمد الرملي عن شيخ الإسلام زكريا بن محمد السليكي الأنصاري عن الإمام الحافظ شهاب الدين بن الفضل أحمد بن علي بن حجر العسقلاني عن الإمام المسند أبي إسحاق إبراهيم بن أحمد التنوخي البعلي عن المسند أبي العباس أحمد بن أبي طالب الحجار الدمشقي عن المسند الحسين بن المبارك الزبيدي عن أبي الوقت عبد الأول ابن عيسى السجزي الهروي عن أبي الحسن عبد الرحمن بن محمد بن المظفر البوشنجي الداودي عن أبي محمد عبد الله بن أحمد بن حموية السرقسي عن أبي عبد الله محمد بن يوسف الفربري عن أمير المؤمنين في الحديث أبي عبد الله محمد بن إسماعيل البخاري رحمهم الله جميعا ورضي عنهم جميعا أنه قال حدثنا أحمد بن شهاب قال حدثنا محمد بن فضيل عن عمارة بن القعقاع عن أبي زرعة عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كلمتان حبيبتان إلى الرحمن خفيفتان على اللسان ثقيلتان في الميزان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. This is the human chain that ties us to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That's for this hadith. All the other hadith with their own asanid tie us to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the realization that should dawn upon the recipient at this moment is that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam received this message and he came back from the cave, what did he say? No more rest after this. There's a duty to be done. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came to this world with a mission. His mission was هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. That mission requires fulfillment. Our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam lived upon the face of this world for his 63 years, but he left a mission behind. He left that responsibility behind on the rest of us, that each recipient of his legacy must now realize that it's not simply a matter of having been here, done that and going away, but you've received something. You've received what Jibreel came, that started with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq and ended with the final revelation to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That mission has become your mission. If that mission has become your mission, therefore your life should become the life of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. There is a mission to be fulfilled. That this year is a trust being passed on to you from each of these men in this chain, and all the other chains. It's not the only one. This is the prime one. This deserves prime of place amongst all the asanid. Therefore, this is the one upon which graduation takes place. But it's not just this chain. We've also received the chain of Sahih Muslim, of Sunan Tirmidhi, Abi Dawood, Nasai ibn Majah, and so many other books of hadith. All of that collectively transmits this responsibility to the new generation. Before we go on with the commentary on the hadith, speak a bit more. By the way, the intention was to speak at length. I had been to graduation functions, final lessons of Sahih Bukhari, where the lecturer speaks for 2, 3, and 4 hours. I'm not able to do that, despite what Mawlana said here. Not able to do that, especially not after lunch. However, for whatever it's worth, we'll try and pass on what this occasion deserves. It's a solemn occasion. All those fawaid, all those benefits that come about by the reading of Sahih al-Bukhari, where we find our objectives can be fulfilled. All of that is there, but that is secondary. The most important one is that once you've received this, you haven't received it to put in your back pocket and go home and do nothing about it. Now it must be spread to others. Do you think this chain would have lived if any of the men in this chain decided, okay, fine, I've read this hadith, I'm going back home, going to my business or to my farm, and that's the end of the story. It would never have happened. But in this ummah, Allah Ta'ala created something. Allah Ta'ala created something which is unequaled in the history of mankind. One of the special characteristics of this ummah which is received from His Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. What is that? Knowledge is something that's going to be transmitted, not simply from books. In fact, they used to look askance, they used to look with suspicion as a person whose entire store of knowledge came from books. He never sat in front of a teacher. It's an important thing to have sat in front of a teacher. This person whom we are speaking about today, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, famous for his memory, famous for his understanding, famous for his ability to separate what is authentic from the unauthentic. But how did he become that? This person, you must realize, he was a little child of 11 years old, very precocious, able to see things at that age which even his teachers couldn't see. So, a teacher, Allama Dakhili, in the town of Bukhara is transmitting hadith. And he's reading a hadith, Sufyan, an Abi Zubayr, and I don't remember the name of the Sahabi he's transmitting it from. 11-year-old child comes forward, he tells him, Ustad, you're making a mistake. So how? What do you know I'm making a mistake? So I'm sure you're making a mistake. Check your kitab, you will find. Ustad says, but what do you know? He says, Ustad, just do me the favor, just check in your kitab, you will realize you're making a mistake. He goes into his house, because I was transmitting from his memory. He goes in and he sees, I'm making a mistake. He comes out and asks him, young boy, so you knew it was a mistake. What is the correct reading then? He says, it is Sufyan and Zubayr ibn Adi. Not Abu Zubayr. And Zubayr ibn Adi. How does the young child know that? Because he started realizing, at that early age already, Allah Ta'ala gave him insight into how Isnad's work, who transmits from who? Who transmits from who? Abu Zubayr, Muhammad ibn Muslim ibn Tadrus is from Makkah. He is one of the students of Sayyidina Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. Sufyan is from Kufa. This is a Kufi Isnad. Sufyan doesn't transmit from Abu Zubayr. When he transmits from Adi, Zubayr ibn Adi, who transmits from a Sahabi who settled in Kufa. That's how he realized what he was. But he was 11 years old. Now, these days you get children of very precocious early age and they can manage that. But there's a danger associated with that. A child who grows up like that and he realizes that I'm superior to my teachers, it becomes a danger for the Ummah. It becomes a danger for himself. Therefore, what has to happen to him? Bukhari speaks about himself. He says that mastasghartu nafsi. Any teacher that I ever came across in my life, I never thought little of myself. When I looked at the teacher, I say, I know as much as you, I know more than you. Now in this ilm of ours, of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's one thing that doesn't go together with this, which is arrogance. What is arrogance and pride? It's pride that made the devil a devil. Iblis had pride and therefore he was not worthy of receiving Allah Ta'ala's blessing. So you cannot have that kind of arrogance and pride when you are bearing the ilm of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This ilm was brought for the hidayah of mankind, not for self-aggrandizement, for us to go about telling people that I'm so great and I'm so great. No. It is to serve the mission of لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّ. This deen must spread. So Bukhari says, wherever I went, I found that I was superior to the teacher that I'm receiving the hadith from. He's teaching me the hadith, but I know better the meaning of the hadith than what he does. I know better the authenticity of it. مَسْتَصْغَرْتُ نَفْسِي إِلَّا عِنْدَ ابْنِ الْمَدِينِ. When he came across his Ustad Ali ibn al-Madini, sat down in front of him and he thought, oh, one of those things again. Suddenly he hears the Ustad speaking about things which he himself never heard about. Speaking about hadith in a manner that he has never ever heard about. Speaking about the intricacies of how to authenticate and how to separate the authentic from the unauthentic. So Bukhari says, on that day I learned that I got a lot to learn. So that is important for the student. The day when he realizes, I am nothing. I've got a lot to learn still. On that day he became the Imam Bukhari that we know today. And that would happen, he would have been one of those hundreds if not thousands of people who lived, and we know nothing about them. He became the Imam Bukhari whose kitab we take and we say through this kitab, the students who are students will become ulama tomorrow. Through his kitab, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sunnah is being preserved. Sheikh Abu Zayd al-Marwazi was a Shafi'i faqih. Spent his whole life in teaching fiqh. And one night he saw in a dream Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling Ya Abu Zayd, حتى متى تقرأ كتاب الشافعي وتترك كتابي. How long have you been reading Imam Shafi'i's kitabs teaching fiqh and you don't read my kitab? When are you going to start reading my kitab? قال وما كتابك يا رسول الله. I said, Ya Rasul, which is your kitab? Which kitab has reached such a high status that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, this is my kitab. قال كتاب محمد ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. That's my kitab. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's kitab. He was proud of this achievement. He was proud of his achievement, and therefore this kitab is in front of us today to graduate these students. Now to turn to the kitab itself. This bab, قول الله تعالى وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ, is related to all these other abwab that come before it. And that's a point that's often missed. A point that is often missed in explanation of this vast hadith. You know, as students, high school, perhaps even university, doing literature, you read Shakespeare's works, and then, or you read what the poet says, and then you have to give interpretation to it. And sometimes we write any nonsense, any rubbish, and we say maybe the author intended this, and maybe the author intended that. And sometimes in hadith we do the same thing. When Bukhari writes this hadith here, then we say maybe he intended this, maybe he intended that. What he intended first and foremost is what the bab says, what this chapter heading says here. These last few abwab of Imam Bukhari, these last few abwab, in fact, this last kitab, this is Kitab Tawheed, I'tisam bil Kitab al-Sunnah, etc. So in here he brings a lot of hadith about our belief structure. Normally others bring this at the beginning of their books. They bring Kitab al-Iman, like Imam Muslim brings it at the beginning. Imam Bukhari brings some of this at the end, because there's a realization. The realization is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that my ummah is going to split. Everything is not going to remain the same. Orthodoxy will become compromised, heterodoxies will set in. Various different innovations will come about in this ummah. When that happens, you need to have something to go back to and say that, what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? What did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? That's how you will be able to ascertain what is haqq and what is batil. So a few decades before Bukhari wrote these final words of the kitab here, a big fitna came about in the Muslim world. A group of people called the Mu'tazila had adopted a different approach to deen. Their approach depended upon what? Rationality. Using your aql and determining what deen is on the basis of your own aql. So there is a titanic struggle in human history between two things. Between reason and revelation. There's reason on one side where a person says, with my own mind I can plot my course in life. On the other hand, there is one that says, Allah Ta'ala did not leave us to our own devices, He gave us guidance. His guidance came in the form of what? Men whom He sent from time to give us guidance. When Allah Ta'ala intervenes in the course of human history, He intervenes in the form of wahy. He intervenes in the form of sending to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Quran and sending to him the Sunnah. And He leaves that with us. And after He leaves, what will happen? Some people will start reclining back upon reason again and drifting away from revelation. Where do we stand? As Muslims, where do we stand in terms of reason and revelation? The foundation of deen is revelation. But reason plays a role in understanding it to a certain extent. To a certain extent, because Allah Ta'ala had given mankind a mind. You were given a brain. But your brain was never intended to be able to encompass all the realities of what this world and the akhirah is all about. It's like what? To make things understandable, we must use the most common metaphors in society. And there's no metaphor more common in society these days than the cell phone. So to understand it, your brain is a 3310. And you have to live in the world of the iPhone. 3310 cannot even do WhatsApp. So our brain has a limited capacity. It's limited in terms of dimensions. Our brain can only understand 3 dimensions. Only 3 dimensions. Which are the dimensions? Length, breadth, and depth. And then perhaps the 4th dimension. Time we can understand as well. Tell me if I'm going over my time. But,
No.
huh? So we have a limited capacity. We have a limited capacity. These days, theoretical physicists are telling us that how many dimensions exist. Mathematically proven exist already, 11 dimensions. Our brains cannot understand that. So when Wahi comes and tells me that Malaika exist, Wahi comes and tells me that Jinn exist, Wahi comes and tells me that there will be adhab in the qabr, and then I take my 3310 mind and try to apply it and say, but we opened the qabr, we saw there's nothing happening in there. Where's the Malaika? Show me where they are. Where's the Jinn? Where's Allah? The arrogance of man. So what our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us, first and foremost, the limitations of your human mind. You must understand the limitations of your mind. Just like Imam Bukhari had to understand his own limitations in front of his teacher. The arrogance of man in the 20th and now the 21st century has taken him to the extent where he's doing what? Forget taking reason and bending it to, forget taking revelation and bending it to fit in with our idea of what reason and science is all about. Not bending it anymore. Modern man has taken the entire concept of a creator, thrown it out of the door, and said, I'm the master of my own destiny, God doesn't exist. That is where the revelation has been cast and where reason has gone. And when this happens, then we come back to what Allah said. What Allah said to us, this here, and many of these final abwab in Bukhari speak about things which we call the ghaibiyat, things that will happen in the akhirah. If Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that your deeds will be weighed, your deeds will be weighed. Now if you lived once upon a time, in the time of these Mu'tazila and others, they will say that things are of two kinds. You'll find one thing which we call a jawhar and another thing which we call an arab. A jawhar has a body. Anything which is jawhar is measurable. You put it on a scale, you can see how heavy it is. But if you've made salah, 2 rak'ahs, you fasted for a day, you made hajj, or you gave 5 cents to a beggar, how is that going to be measured? Does that have a physical body? No, it's an abstract concept. Your deeds which you have done, they are abstract concepts. How do you measure abstract concepts? The Quran says, نَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. The Quran says, وَالْوَزْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقِّ. The fact that your deeds will be weighed on the Qiyamah is the truth. So now you come with your very limited mind and you say, well, this is not what it means something else. The problem there is that you're trying to apply your limited mind to concepts far beyond what you're able to understand. All that you're expected to do at this moment is to say that Allah Ta'ala says it and I believe it. Allah Ta'ala has revealed it and I believe it. And as time goes on, you will realize that things that you couldn't understand so many hundreds of years ago become easily understandable. So once upon a time, we couldn't measure heat, we couldn't measure light, we couldn't measure speed. Somehow or the other we were able to measure all of those things. All those abstract things have become measurable now. If man has the ability to measure the abstract, man can measure the humidity in the air, man can measure so many things. The one who created man cannot measure your deeds. We say, Amanna wa saddaqna. We believe in what Allah Ta'ala has revealed, without any further questions asked. But it is part of the arrogance of mankind that he will start rejecting things when it doesn't suit him. So the Mu'tazila came about. And they were very free thinking and very rational, and therefore they were very prone to start rejecting the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we submit to what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said. And we say that even if we cannot understand today how it works, وَلَتَعْلَمُنَّ نَبَأَهُ بَعْدَ حِينٍ. This Quran is what? إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا ذِكْرٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. This is a dhikr, this is a remembrance for all of the world. وَلَتَعْلَمُنَّ نَبَأَهُ بَعْدَ حِينٍ. After a while you'll understand what it's all about if you are unable to understand it right now. So this final chapter Imam Bukhari puts down and tells us that وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ. We believe in the fact that there will be نَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ. Allah Ta'ala says that we set up al-mawazin, scales, al-qist, just scales, لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. On the day of Qiyamah we will set up that. We believe therein. But this is connected to another debate. What had happened is that between the Mu'tazila and the Ahlul Sunnah, there came about a huge friction. What happened is that the Mu'tazila had gained the upper hand in the courts of the king. The Khalifa of the time, Al-Ma'mun, had converted to the Mu'tazili faith. Not only had he done that, he had also set upon a program. What was that? All the ulama must be forced to state this point here. Which point? The main point of the Mu'tazili propagation here was that the Quran is the created word of Allah Ta'ala. That goes against what we receive from, what the ulama at that time received from their teachers, who received from their teachers, who received from the tabi'i, who received from the Sahaba, who received from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is that the Quran is a sifa of Allah Ta'ala. Quran is one of the attributes of Allah Ta'ala. Attributes of Allah Ta'ala are not created in as much as Allah Himself is not created. You do not apply the idea of being created with Allah Ta'ala at all. This is Allah Ta'ala's sifa. So the ulama were opposed to it. They were then forced to make the statement, many of them to save their lives, stated, yes, the Quran is makhluk, the Quran is created. One man stood up against that. He was Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal and refused to recant. And he was lashed for it in the court of the king, but he refused to recant. So by his resistance on that day, the purity of the Aqeedah of the Ahlul Sunnah was saved. But it wasn't long before a new thing occurred. And this is something that we need to take note of in the age in which we live. So the fitna is gone. Ahmad ibn Hanbal stood firm. But now sometimes we go over the limits in stating what is haqq. The haqq is that the Quran is not created. Now comes the wrong understanding of it. If I sit in front of you now and I read to you, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ara'ayta alladhi yukadhibu bid-din. There's a Quran that I'm reading. You're hearing audible sounds coming from my mouth. That we call what? Lafzi bil Quran. When I recite it, these words came out. Those words that you heard now, this is hair splitting, by the way, and we don't do this kind of hair splitting anymore, but it was part of our history. The question comes up, the Quran as it exists as a sifa of Allah is uncreated. But when I recite it with my own tongue, is that created or uncreated? Well, I just made it now. I moved my tongue and I brought air out of my chest, and that's how you hear the sounds. So that's uncreated. However, Imam Ahmad felt that don't even open that door right now because a big fitna will come about on account of that. So some people then transmitted from Imam Ahmad the view, they say, Imam Ahmad says that even when I read with my own mouth, the Quran is uncreated. That's also uncreated. Then it went further. This is what people don't understand. Then they say, when you take a pen and you write on a piece of paper, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, even the ink is uncreated. Even the paper is uncreated. How can you say the paper is uncreated? Someone made the paper. How can you say the ink is uncreated? We know that the ink maker made the ink. How can you say that the pen that wrote it also? So sometimes we go over the limits and then it becomes irrational. Our defense of haqq becomes irrational. And it creates another new problem. Now it became a new problem. Any kind of reform, whenever there is reform, remember reform focuses upon what? Reform focuses upon the fact that something is wrong. There are certain practices which are not in line, certain beliefs that are not in line, certain things must be rectified in society. Reform is necessary. And Allah Ta'ala, and Rasulullah tells us every 100 years, Allah Ta'ala will send the mujaddid to renew. Now, if Allah Ta'ala is sending the mujaddid to renew things, it means that it is a natural thing that entropy will take place, things will go wrong. So someone needs to restate. But we need to know where does the reform stop as well. Because when the reformers become overzealous, when the reformers don't know where to stop with the reform, then we internalize the problem and the entire ummah suffers. So this is what happened. People went about with this idea saying that even when I read with my own mouth, then that is uncreated. Imam Bukhari was one of those that understood you've gone over the limits. So now this time he was no longer a young man, he was in his deep 40s already. He came to the town of Nishapur. Nishapur today is in Iran. In those days, Iran wasn't a Shia country as we have it today. It's only for the past 400-500 years that has happened. Iran contained the cream of the ulama of the Ahlul Sunnah. So when he came to Nishapur, the ulama of Nishapur came out to come and welcome him 1 mile, 2 miles outside of the town. They came. Great alim is coming to our town. And with great fanfare, they brought him into the city. The greatest muhaddith of the time has arrived. And the chief muhaddith of Nishapur was a person called Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Zuhri. And he tells his students, by all means, don't come to my class tomorrow, go to his class. In fact, Imam Bukhari had received hadith from Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli. Dhuhli is one of his asatidha. And then you find that there's always going to be troublemakers in society. What do the troublemakers do? A majlis of hadith. We need to read the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the dars is over and someone will put up his hand. Share a question. What's your question? Lafzi bil Qur'ani makhluq or ghayr makhluq? When I recite, is my recitation makhluq or not? 3 times he asks the question, Imam Bukhari ignores it because he sees this is fitna coming here. At the 3rd time, he recognizes the fact that you have to give some answer, because these people are not going to stay silent. They're going to spread a wrong idea. So he gave a roundabout answer that states the point, but not in a way that he hopes they will not make fitna, which is exactly what they went to go and do. They went to go to the rest of town, they went to go and tell all the ulama, did you hear? Muhammad ibn Ismail Bukhari says that lafzi bil Qur'ani makhluq. The next thing that happened was what? Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli and all the other ulama of the town said, that man has to leave town. That man is a mubtadi', he's a bid'ati. He must leave this town, he's not welcome here. Yesterday they welcomed him at the gates, outside of the gates, miles outside the gates. Today he has to leave town. Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli calls his students together and he says that, I announce to all of you, whoever goes to Muhammad ibn Ismail's class mustn't come to my class anymore. Everyone sits silent. One man gets up. One man gets up, he goes home. He takes all the hadith that he received from Muhammad ibn Yahya Dhuhli. He says, Jazakallah khair, here's your hadith. I'm going to Muhammad ibn Ismail Bukhari. This young man's name is Muslim ibn Hajjaj. Abu Hajjaj Muslim, Abu Hussein Muslim ibn Hajjaj al-Qushayri. Due to him standing with his Ustad Imam Bukhari, he became the 2nd great Imam of Hadith that day. When Bukhari was welcomed into town, hundreds of them came. The day when Bukhari was driven out of this town here, only 2 persons accompanied him outside of going out. Only 2 persons. Only his student Imam Muslim and another person called Ahmad ibn Salam al-Naysaburi. Everyone else left him. He had to suffer there. They drove him out of town. He went to Samarkand. They wrote a letter to Samarkand saying this person is a mubtadi, he must drive him out of there as well. He left from there and he went to Khartank, little village where he had some relatives, and that's where he spent his last days in great grief at what has happened to the Ummah. So that is when the Ahlus Sunnah, and these are all Ahlus Sunnah, these are not Mu'tazila, these are Muhaddithin, when they don't know where the reform should stop. When they internalize the problem of reform. Initially, if someone is unorthodox, they're off the line, then what do? Point a finger and say, this is wrong, this must be reformed. That's a necessity. Eventually, if you don't know where to stop, then you'll start pointing fingers at your own people. This alim, he's on my time, no, he's not on my group. He's a mubtadi himself, and he's a mubtadi, and he's a mubtadi. And there's no end to it whatsoever. There's no end to it. Today we are witnessing the graduation of ulama. Let me say something about the graduation of ulama. If there is a society in which ilm is being produced and ulama are being produced, that is a sign of the fact that Allah Ta'ala has decreed that deen will continue existing in the society. And when Allah Ta'ala has decreed that deen should die, Islam should die out, the first thing that's taken away is the ulama. Because in Allah la yaqbidu al-ilma intiza'an yantazi'u min qulubin sudurin nas. When Allah Ta'ala wants to take ilm away, it's not that yesterday you knew something, tomorrow you wake up, it's taken out of your heart. Allah Ta'ala takes it away by taking away the ulama. If the moment there is no more ulama left, what will happen? اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالا. People will turn to, for leadership, turn to ignorant people who have no knowledge of deen whatsoever. فسئلوا فأفتوا عن غير علم فضلوا وأضلوا. They will be asked, they will answer, but they won't have this kitab in front of them. They won't have the knowledge that was passed from generation after generation among them. They will start giving answers. The answers will be wrong answers. They will go astray and take others astray together with them. When Allah Ta'ala decreed for this community, you know what happened in the 60s, from the late 1600 onwards in this country of ours. What happened was that a group of Muslims were transplanted against their will to these shores. They didn't want to come here. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't by choice. It was forced migration. It was forced migration. The Cape of Good Hope in those days was the equivalent of Guantanamo Bay 300 years ago. So they sent those ulama from far across the seas, send them to such a place in which you think everything will die out, inshallah, nothing will happen of them. These are mujahideen, these are ulama. They thought one thing, but Allah has something else in mind. Because يُرِيدُونَ لِيُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ. People want to put out the nur of Allah, the light of Allah. وَيَأْبَى اللَّهُ إِلَّا أَن يُتِمَّ نُورًا. Allah refuses any outcome other than the completion of the nur, with which He said Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So those ulama who are transplanted to these countries, these parts of the world, in their minds, could they even have imagined that the day will come when people from other parts of the world will come to South Africa to come gain their deen here? It might not have been in their wildest thoughts. It's part of the plan of Allah Ta'ala. And the preservation of deen in this part of the world at that time happened on account of what? Because there wasn't a single generation that did not have ulama amongst them. How did they come here? They revolted, they were incarcerated, they were sent here, then they were freed, they go into society and they spread deen. They teach people their deen. But look at somewhere else. Look at North America, South America. Great amounts of slaves were taken, or rather, free men were taken, made into slaves. Many of them were people of ilm. They were taken to the plantations of North and South America, made to work on far-flung regions. They might have had ilm. They did not have the ability to transmit it to others. And the result was, deen died out. Deen died out because ulama did not find the structures to transmit their knowledge to others. They did not find those structures to transmit it. Sometimes they did find the structures to transmit it. In the year 1836, something happened in South Africa. In the year 1836, the slaves were freed. Slavery came to an end. And that was one of the most exuberant periods for da'wah. The amount of people that became Muslim during those days that were not Muslim on the farms. I'm speaking about the Cape where I am from. They were not Muslim on the farms, but they were freed. And now they were free to go and settle in the towns. Now on the farm, you're kept as a slave. You're given a slave name. You're made to dress in slave clothing. Now you're going to the town. Many chose themselves to become Muslim, adopt clothing which gives them dignity, adopt a name which gives them a dignity, adopt a religion which gives them dignity. We have lost the momentum of that da'wah of 1835. We have lost that. That must be gained back again. This particular thing, we're sitting together here, let that be part of this message. That is part of لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. In the town of Bahia in Brazil, in 1836, while our people were enjoying the freedom of the slaves, in 1836 in Bahia in Brazil, there were a great amount of Yoruba tribesmen who were enslaved in South America. Among them were a number of ulama. A number of ulama. Some of them had become free and they had set up masajid, they had set up madaris, they had been importing clothing for themselves, calico to make. You've seen how the Nigerians dress. They wear about 10 times as much calico, cloth as we wear, because that is your dignity. That's a Muslim. You come out of slavery where you're forced to wear a loincloth. Now you're going to dress yourself as a Muslim. That's your shi'ar. You're going into life and show the world that I'm a Muslim. So they would do all of those things. And then a mistake happened in the year 1836. One of the ulama of that town, he was a great man. He was a hafiz of Quran who had made medical father of Quran as well. He is known, and in fact, like here, they were given names by the Portuguese. He was known by the name Pacifico Lusitana. He must have had some other Muslim name, Allahu Alam. But he was jailed. And was severely tortured in jail. So his students got together, they said, we are going to start a revolution. They got together in secret, we're going to start a revolution. Now here's a very important lesson. If ever you're contemplating a revolution, no big revolutions of course, small revolutions. If ever you're contemplating, don't tell your wife. Because what happened, one of the conspirators had a fight with his wife. This is actual history, it's not a joke. Actually, he had a fight with his wife before. So his wife chanced upon them where they're sitting and making these plans. She heard all the plans and she went to the white man and told them, my husband and everyone else, they're coming for you guys. So the Portuguese, the police and the armed forces were ready for them. When they came out, they were ambushed. One of the first to die was the husband, in fact. The sad story is thereafter, they executed all the ulama of that community. They took a number of them, they sent them back to Africa. They took this person who was in jail, the Hafiz of Quran was in jail, was lashed for several days, every day, 50 to 100, old man of over 8 years old. Lashed for no reason, he's already in jail before the revolution. They lashed him till he died, rahimahullah. But the result of this was what? When there were no longer ulama left in a society, then what happened? Less than 100 years later, there were no Muslims. If ilm is, now, there are several departments of the deen of ours, several departments of deen. There's ilm, there's tasawwuf, there's jihad, there is da'wah. Which is the most important one? People ask me this question, I say, don't ask useless questions. All of them are important. All of these are what? To ask the question, but which is more important? That is an unnecessary and a counterproductive question. Whatever Allah has made you part of, you do that. And let the others do their job as well. Because this deen of ours is a circle. When you cut the circle into 4 quarters, there's a quadrant. Da'wah is 1 quadrant of it. Jihad is 1 quadrant of it. Ilm is 1 quadrant. And if any 1 quadrant, if every slice of the pizza starts thinking, I'm the pizza, we have a problem there. And that's a problem that we face sometimes. So let not the various genres of deen start fighting one another. There's a bigger fight to fight. There's a preservation of deen, and there's the necessity of the deen kulli that must still be fulfilled. It makes no sense for us to start fighting against one another. And when we have differences of opinion between ourselves, let's find ways to deal with those differences of opinion instead of creating new situations in which the Imam Bukharis are driven out of Nishapur. In which they are driven out of Nishapur. And today we look at this is a great Imam Bukhari. But he had to suffer. And today we run the same risk of creating precipitating exactly similar situation. The ulama pointing fingers at one another because they do not know how to negotiate their differences. There will always be differences between ulama. The point is not to work out who's right and who's wrong. The point is to work out how to get along with one another. And not to point fingers and to suspect and to accuse one another. That is not to the benefit of deen. There are 3 ways perhaps, in which ulama can leave a society. The one way is what happened in Bahia, where an oppressor comes and he destroys all the ulama of a country, of a town. We ran that risk in 1857 in India, where the ulama started a jihad against the British, and he did not succeed. So after that, to give you an idea how severe was the retribution of the British, they wouldn't just hang you. Hang you is still too easy. Sometimes they would line people, ulama, up against the wall and just shoot them. Sometimes they would hang them, sometimes they would behead them, whatever. But to put the fear of God into everyone, what do? They take the living body of an alim, stick him down the barrel of a cannon, and then shoot his body to pieces. Why? Just to get the awe and the fear of the British government to everyone. There was a very big chance that deen could die out after a situation like that. Where the ulama are being hunted down. Where is that alim? I'm looking for this one. He participated. Very great chance that deen could have died out. And then the elders in the Saharanpur district sat together and said, we're facing this particular problem that deen might die out. If there's no ilm, you can have tasawwuf, deen will go corrupted. If there's no ilm, you can have da'wah, you don't know what you're going towards. In fact, I heard from my Ustad Mufti Ahmad Palanpuri, his tafsir of the ayah, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً. Towards the end of Surah Tawbah. Now Surah Tawbah is all about the munafiqeen and about jihad. You have to go out in the path of Allah to fight jihad. Because what had happened? The Battle of Tabuk. And there are some people that stayed behind, all the munafiqeen. They showed their colors by staying behind. So after they stayed behind, Allah Ta'ala reprimanded them extremely severely. عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Allah says to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when the munafiqeen came and asked you for permission, why did you give them permission? You shouldn't have given them permission, because if you did not give them permission, then they would have been forced to accompany the expedition. And then if they go against your express command by staying behind, the whole community would have known these are the munafiqeen. They were given permission, so they got away with it. So after that severe reprimand that Allah Ta'ala had given the entire ummah, everyone was on their toes. They thought to themselves, if now Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has to say that there's jihad, we'll go forth and who will stay behind? Not a single man will stay behind. So when the ummah came onto this mindset, that the next call for jihad will see no one left behind in Medina, that's when Allah Ta'ala said, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفِرُوا كَافَّةً. No, it's not required that everyone goes out. فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ. Of every group, some should go forth, some should stay behind. Some should stay behind, so that those who are staying behind, what are they doing for the rest of us? لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. Someone needs to study deen, because those are going out to defend deen, but what they are doing is not the deen itself, it's the defense of deen. They're defending deen. Deen still needs to be transmitted. Deen still needs to be taught. So when those mujahideen come back, then they will find the fuqaha of the ummah there, لِيُنذِرُوا قَوْمَهُ إِذَا رَجَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ, so that those who have knowledge can now warn the others when they come back to them, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ, that they might take heed then. So jihad is something intended for, not for itself. Unlike all the images that the media is spinning of us, Muslims are hell-bent on fighting. No, Muslims are not hell-bent on fighting, but Muslims are hell-bent on preserving their deen. They will do whatever it takes to preserve their deen. So the preservation of deen, jihad is there for that purpose. Jihad doesn't supplant it. And if you have tasawwuf and you have no ilm, you have tasawwuf, and can give you a number of examples. I'll give you 2 examples, perhaps 3. 2 examples. In the time of Sayyid Abdul Qadir Jilani in Baghdad, there was a Sufi from Kurdistan, he was called Ali ibn Musafir. So he decided to go back to his home country and make da'wah amongst them. He went back, I'm cutting the story very short. He went back and started making da'wah amongst his people. His grave is still there till today. But he passed away. His children took over after him. Sometimes the children are able to take on their father's duties because they also have ilm and they also have, but these children had no ilm. The next generation, more children. The next generation, more children took over. At the end of it, this entire Sufi tariqah of Shaykh Ali ibn Musafir turned into a religion other than Islam. It's not Muslim. It's not, you must have heard of the Yazidis of Iraq. The Yazidis of Iraq who have a completely different religion. This is where they came from. A Sufi tariqah that with the passage of time lost ilm. So they continued doing certain things, but سُئِلُوا فَأَفْتَوْا عَنْ غَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. In Iran, there was a Sufi tariqah called the Safawi tariqah. They were Sunni, and they were Shafi'i in fiqh and Khalwati in tasawwuf. But once again, from father to son, and the son turns out to know not too much about deen, and he converts to Shiism. And then that family converts the entire Iran by force to Shiism. Why? Because ilm went out the one door. Tasawwuf doesn't serve that purpose any longer. Tasawwuf won't preserve deen. Shah Waliullah writes, why do you think that our Aqidah, the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, is that Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma are better than Ali and Uthman, especially Ali ibn Abi Talib? Some people would think that Sayyidina Ali is more deserving of being number 1 because through him tasawwuf was transmitted. Shah Waliullah says, and I also for a while started imagining things of that nature until I saw in a dream Sayyid al-Wujud, Nabiyana sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who came to him in the dream and explained to him, why is Abu Bakr Umar Afdal min Ali? Why is their position first? And because what did they establish? After Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death, they established the Zahir of Deen. The Zahir of Deen does all these practices, Salah, Zakah, Sawm, Hajj, Jihad, everything else, they established that. Now and then Sayyidina Ali came and he added the element of the spirituality that we have. Now to give you again an easy metaphor to understand it. The spirituality side is like water. If you want water, you're going to take a vessel, a cup, a glass or whatever, and that's how you're going to drink from it. You're not going to just have an open tap running there, and what happens if water runs not into a vessel, it runs wild on the floor, there's no benefit from it. For water to exist in the way that Allah wants it to exist, it must exist within that particular cup. That cup is the cup of the Sharia. Tariqah has to exist inside the cup of Sharia. If Tariqah does not exist within Sharia, there is no Tariqah any longer, it becomes something akin to Hinduism. Something like Hinduism it becomes. We actually have an example of that. There's a group international called the International Sufi Movement. This was a group started by a Chishti Sufi from Hyderabad in India that went to North America. His name was Sufi Inayat Khan. When he went to America in the beginning, then he was still making salah and everything else. And then there came a time when he decided that no more salah. We have our own kind of ibadat. You just go in a circle, sing Allah, Allah, la ilaha illallah, and that is it. You don't need to be a Muslim. This group exists in South Africa. Close to Newlands Rugby Stadium, there's a building called the Sufi Temple. That's where they are. They are Sufi, but they are not Muslim. Tasawwuf without Sharia gets you that kind of Islam as well. There's not that kind of Islam, that kind of Tasawwuf. It doesn't even lay any claim to being Islam. So, this here that is being transmitted is the Zahir of the Sharia. This was established by Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhuma. They passed it on to us. So once the cup was established, then it could be filled with the tariqah that came afterwards. Try and do the one in isolation of the other, that will not be the preservation of the deen of our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. To complete the dars as we go on, now Imam Bukhari tells us, this is about the weighing of deeds. But in this weighing of deeds, he's trying to point a finger at something very important. He is saying that, when I read Quran with my own tongue, when I'm reading Duha al-Layli idha saja, this is my amal. This is not Allah's kalam. My amal. I'm imitating Allah's kalam, but this is makhluk. And how do we know it is makhluk? Because it will be measured on the day of Qiyamah. My amal. It's my own amal, it will be measured. وَأَنَّ أَعْمَالَ بَنِي آدَمَ وَقَوْلَهُمْ يُوزَنُ وَتُوزَنُ. It will be weighed. It's not Allah. That's a misunderstanding of something. That's not exactly what Allah's kalam is. The one which is not makhluk is Allah's kalam, which is sifa qaima bidatihi. Then he goes on to mention one or two other things, and he says, قال مجاهد القسطاس هو العدل بالرومية. This brings up the issue, are there non-Arabic words in the Quran? Are there non-Arabic words? The ulama have two opinions. Some say there are non-Arabic words in the Quran, some say there are not. And both of them are correct opinions. To understand it very easily, we ask this question. Are there non-English words in the English language? Yes, there are. Shampoo is an Indian word and it's become part of the Indian vocabulary. Stoop and kral Afrikaans words, it's become part of the English language. So languages develop. Like that, Arabic language is also a language that developed. And it acquired words from outside of the Arabic language. But once it's been acquired, and no one will deny today that stoop and kral and shampoo are English words. It appears in Oxford Dictionary, it's English. So there are certain words in the Arabic dictionary and certain words in the Quran which came from a non-Arabic source. In this case, what they call Ar-Rumiyya. And if I should ask the question, which is the language, when the Arabs speak of Ar-Rumiyya, which language do you think it is? Which language do you think?
Roman.
There's no language called Roman. Huh? What's that? People generally would think it's Latin. No, it's not Latin, because the Romans that the Arabs were in contact with was the Byzantine Romans, whose capital was at Constantinople and not at Rome. In Rome they spoke Latin, in Constantinople they spoke Greek. So what they refer to here as Romia is Greek. Afterwards they will refer to the language as Yunani. Here it is Greek. So now we ask the next question. So if Christos is from the Greek language, does that word still exist in the Greek language? Now what's Christos? Christos today to us means a scale. So what's the origin of it in Greek? Any Greek speakers? Yes, the word is pronounced in two ways. One is Christos, one is Kostas. Both of them are there. The word Kostas exists in the Greek language up to today. Kostas. You might have found a Greek friend who has the name Kostas. Kostas is the diminutive form of Constance. And Kostas, what does it mean? Like the English word constant. What does a constant mean? What's constant?
Continuous.
It's always the same. So a scale that always gives exactly the same measurement. Not the type of scale whereby you cheat your customers. The scale that always gives the same measurement. That's a constant scale. That was called a kostas. And the Arabs got it from there because they used to trade with the Greeks, with the Romans. And from there it entered the Arabic language of kistas. That's where the word comes from. Then you might think sometimes that this constant, it also, the Arabic language actually has a root like that. Qasata yaqsitu and aqsata yuqsitu. Seems to be coming from the same root. So isn't this perhaps an Arabic word that came from the Arabic root? What militates against that understanding is that according to some, there's no sira. You can have qasata, but qustas, yani fu'las, you don't find a scale like that. So no, in all probability it is what? Correct to say that it is a Greek word. But qasata yaqsitu. Qasata yaqsitu has to do with justice. It happens to be one of those words where if you have it on the thulathi mujarrad scale, it gives you exact opposite of what we need to take it to the thulathi mazid. In other words, qasata has the opposite meaning of aqsata. Just add one hamza in front of it and it has different meaning. Qasata, yaqsitu, what does it mean? Both have to do with justice. The one means to take away justice and be unjust. Qasata yaqsitu means to take justice away from someone else. In other words, to be unjust. But aqsata yuqsitu, that has the meaning of giving justice to someone else, being just. So that Imam Bukhari points out by saying, Al-Qistasu Masdarul Muqsid. I might say Masdarul Muqsid, no. Qist is the Masdar of Qasid. Well, it's the indirect Masdar of Muqsid. Because from Qasata you make Qasid, and then from Qasata you take the scale of If'al and you make Muqsid. So it's the source of the Masdar before that. And the Muqsid is the Adil. And that's what comes in the Quran, Muhammad, or rather, where's the sound? Sorry. وَأَمَّا الْقَاسِدُ فَهُوَ الْجَائِرُ. That's a qasid which comes in the Quran which says وَأَمَّا الْقَاسِطُونَ فَكَانُوا لِجَهَنَّمَ حَطَبًا. Imam Bukhari does this in his kitab. he has this habit of giving us lexical information. Lexical from the other word, dictionary meanings of words that might or might not hold contact with the verb directly. But since he has mentioned Nadal Mawazin al-Qist, so he finds a need for explaining the word. That's as much as there is, alhamdulillah, that is done, but now we come to the rest of the hadith. So he goes on to say, حدثنا أحمد بن إشكال. You know, when Allah Ta'ala wanted the legacy of his Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to be preserved, Allah Ta'ala revealed the Quran. And he says that, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا ذِكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ حَافِظُونَ. So when Allah Ta'ala has given us the promise that it will remain preserved, what system did Allah Ta'ala devise for that? The system devised for that is the system of Hufad. In this ummah, not hundreds, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, millions of Hufad of the Quran. Millions of Hufad. In this ummah of ours, we did not make the mistake of previous nations. We did not rely upon a book alone. We did not transcribe everything into a book. If we had to transcribe everything in a book, there's a great possibility that someone can come along and do what? Change the book. And that's exactly what happened. يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلِمَ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. In our ummah, when I say we didn't rely upon a book, let me restate, we didn't rely upon the written word alone. Together with the written word, there has to be the human agent as well. The written word together with the human agent, in a situation where the human agent is the more important one. Because the society in which hadith emerged, Quran emerged, where it had to be preserved, that society was one in which barely a few people could read and write. But there were people who had great memories. They would memorize long qasidas, poems from the Jahiliyyah, poets that died hundreds of years ago. They had very great memories. They would be able also to preserve their genealogy for generations and generations. And someone is able to say, I'm the son of so-and-so, and the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so. So all of this was the raw material that would go into the preservation of this hadith. So the early generations of muhaddithin, of Sahaba and Tabi'in, preserved the memories of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in their minds, and some of them started writing it down as well. But it wasn't immediately made into formal writing. Why was that so? Why is it only that almost 100 years after Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time, almost 100 years, it took almost 100 years before writing became in vogue. Writing was done, but not at a wide scale. Most of the muhaddithin used to depend upon their memories for that. Why was that done? In order to ensure the uncorrupted preservation of the Quran. This community did not have much of writing amongst them. So there was a great chance that if there was a lot of writing around, what will happen? A point will come when someone will say, I'm not sure if this Quran is this hadith. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, whoever wrote anything, don't write. Wipe that out, destroy that writings. So that for the first century, the Quran becomes a stable scripture, crystallized. Because this society didn't have, before us there were other societies, the Greeks, the Romans, the Indians and everyone else. They were highly literate societies. And when they set about preserving their scriptures, they did not make sure to separate between what? What was the words of Allah Ta'ala from what is the words of the Nabi and what is the words of his apostles. Today in the New Testament, which is supposed to be the Injil, you find in there what? 4 books. Gospel of Mark, Luke, John, and who's the other one? Matthew. And is that the entire New Testament? No, that's not all. Thereafter you find the Acts of the Apostles and a few other books like that. And then you find the writings of Paul and Peter. In fact, Paul's letters, Paul who never saw Isa alayhi salam, his letters form a major section of the Bible, which is believed to be the inerrant word of God. And it was clearly written by Paul. Thessalonians and Cappadocians, and those are letters which Paul wrote to the people of Thessalonia and the people of Cappadocia. So you can clearly see they did not keep the differentiation between what was divine revelation and what was man's word. Highly literate societies did not manage. But over this ummah, there is the inayah of Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala is taking care of this ummah. Allah is taking care of the preservation of the hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Mark, Luke, John and Matthew can write down, they don't even tell us from who did they get the information. Up to today it's a mystery. Because either 3 or 4 of them never saw Christ in their life. They are writing which they heard from someone who's unnamed, But what did we just do now? We have recited to you the names of 30 odd people from whom this one statement of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came down to us. And we weren't the most advanced ummah at the time. Do you see Allah's rahmah over this ummah? Do you see the manner in which Allah has preserved for this ummah, which He has preserved for none of the other ummahs? When the time came that this preservation of this hadith has to happen, the Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu was murdered around the year 34. Up to that point, for that first 30 years after Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's death, Sahaba was still that old society in which everyone knows everyone trusts everyone. So a person will say, I heard Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying, and when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when someone quotes Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, no one doubts him. No one doubts him. Why? We know you. You were a good person. You were for 20 years with Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now there was a realization, this community is no longer the same. This community has become one in which there are some people who are so opposed to the objectives, the joint objectives of the community, that they were prepared to kill the Khalifa. If they're prepared to kill the Khalifa, that means they're out to destroy this legacy. Therefore, we need to adopt a system to make sure that they don't forge things and put it into the mouth of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is exactly what people have started doing. People started forging all kinds of hadith. They started forging all kinds of hadith, and our ulama had to respond. With Allah Ta'ala's tawfiq, they had to start responding to this. They responded with a system unequaled in the history of mankind. A system that looks at the human agent. Can we trust you to transmit the words of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? If you are a person that I've known for my entire life to be every second word that comes out of your mouth is a lie, I'm not going to trust you to transmit the words of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we developed a system. There's no time to get into the details of the system. All that I endeavor doing right now is to give you a little bit of understanding and a great amount of pride in the system that Allah Ta'ala devised for the preservation of the hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The crowning achievement in that program of preserving the hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam against fabrication is this kitab that's in front of us. This kitab that's in front of us here, Imam Bukhari spent 16 years selecting hadith by hadith. And it's not as simple as, okay, kalimatan. No. He used to say, Ahmad ibn Ishaq. Is that a person that I can trust? Yes, of course, I met him. 2 occasions. He's from Kufa, I met him there. I transmitted hadith from him, and I met him the second time in a town called Tinis in Egypt. That was 2 years before he passed away. He transmitted the hadith to me, and the same hadith that he transmitted to me, Qutayba ibn Sa'id transmitted to me as well, and the two are exactly the same. Abu Khaythama Zuhair ibn Harb transmitted the same hadith to me, and it's exactly the same. All of this indicates the fact that this is a reliable person. So he's okay. So next person, حدثنا محمد ibn Fudayl. Muhammad ibn Fudayl, there are a few negative question marks around some aspects of him. However, he's trustworthy. He's completely trustworthy. Therefore, I'm going to accept him as a trustworthy narrator. Umara ibn al-Qaqa. This person is Umara ibn al-Qaqa ibn Shubruma. In the time of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, Imam Abu Hanifa is the famous faqih of Kufa, but together with him there was another faqih called Abdullah ibn Shubruma. This is Abdullah ibn Shubruma's nephew, and he was known for what? His father was a great alim and a great pious person. He exceeded his uncle. He exceeded his uncle in piety. Was such a pious person, and when you look at his hadith, you see that he transmits not things that are out of line, that exactly as everyone else transmits. And then you go above him, Abu Zur'a, Abu Zur'a, that's Abu Zur'a, that's a kunya, that's not his name. His name is Amr. His father's name is Amr as well. His father passed away in the time of his grandfather. His grandfather is Sayyidina Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajali, Sahib Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most handsome among the Sahaba. But he had a son called Amr, who died in his lifetime, so he gave his grandson the same name. And then he, together with his father, he met Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. He lived in the time of Sayyidina Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and he distinguished himself as a great scholar, great muhaddith, especially student of Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. These are people we know them. In fact, they say one of the uncanny things about the season is you had Umar ibn al-Qaqa, who exceeded his uncle in piety and goodness. Abu Zur'a also had an uncle. His grandfather is Jarir ibn Abdullah, his father is Amr. He had an uncle called Ibrahim ibn Jarir. His uncle is one of his ustads. And he also went on, they say, to exceed his uncle in piety. We know these details about these people. This is ghaybun min fayr. These are a few details that I piece together, and with a few minutes remaining can pass along to you. I want you to understand to what extent our ulama went to preserve the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes I will point out the fact that in this hadith here, Muhammad ibn Fudayl is the lone narrator. There's no one else in the world who transmits this hadith but him. After him, there's about 50 people who hear it from him. But He's the only one in the world who transmits this hadith from his ustad. Aside from his ustad, Umar ibn al-Qanqa, Abu Zur'a is the only one who transmits this hadith. Above him, only Abu Hurairah. This is the type of hadith that the muhaddithin recognize. They call it a gharib hadith or a fard hadith. Now those hadith uncorroborated by other hadiths. Imam Bukhari made a point of putting this hadith in the end of his kitab. Because he started the hadith, the kitab with a similar hadith. You will remember which one was that. Where he narrated from who? Abdullah ibn Zubayr al-Humaydi, from Sufyan ibn Uyayna, from Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, from Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi, from Al-Qama, from Umar. And what did Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say there? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That hadith, only Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari transmitted, no one else who shares the transmission. And above him, only Muhammad ibn Ibrahim, there's no one else who shares the transmission. Imam Bukhari is telling us by those two hadith, in the beginning and the end, book ending the kitab between these two hadith, as far as we are concerned, that's a sahih hadith. Because it's not how many people narrate it, it's what kind of people narrate it. So, there came a time when the Orientalists started pointing fingers and trying to poke holes in this. And they say, clearly you can see Muhammad ibn Hudayr is not corroborated by anyone. He must be the person who forged it. They look at our hadith and immediately say, all forgeries. It says all Bukhari's forgeries. So they'll say, when Muhammad ibn Hudayr, who lives like about 200 years later, and no one corroborates him, that's indication of him being the forger. We say, we wish that people were a bit more fair. Because the fact that a person is the lone narrator of something, only he transmits this good information. By the way, that's not, this two bookending hadith, beginning and end, are rare cases. Most of the other hadith corroborated. For example, you might hear people saying that Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates how many hadith? There are many people that run around with it, that have heard a figure of 5,000. No, it's not 5,000. It's not 5,000 hadith. It's less than half that number. Less than half that number. But if you look at repetitive narrations, that's what brings it up to 5,000. That's it, repeated narrations. If you look at single narrations, it comes up at 2,300. And then you take the 2,300 and the bulk of them, at least 2,000 of them, Abu Hurairah narrates and someone else narrates. Abu Hurairah narrates the same thing. Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha said, corroborated. The hadith of Sahaba corroborated. When people who narrate corroborated the hadith, we accept that, then the same person who narrates a known hadith will accept that one as well, because it's the quality of person. In Islam, we do not separate the knowledge from the agent who's carrying that knowledge. Because in هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ. This ilm here, this is very deen itself. فَانْظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. Careful who you take your deen from. Don't take your deen from كُلُّ مَنْ هَبَّ وَدَبَّ. Any Tom, Dick and Harry. In Islam we don't take it. You look at the person, is this the type of person? This is the type of person that I want to take my deen from. You don't separate the two. Alhamdulillah. We've come, I think that's a sign that I have to finish off. We've come to the end. I've tried to speak about a few aspects of this hadith here. The very final word that I want to leave you with is this, that having said all of those things, Imam Bukhari is also giving us one final message. That one final message is that to get closer to Allah Ta'ala, to get the pleasure, the love of Allah Ta'ala, to get Allah Ta'ala's approval, you don't have to go and die in the path of Allah Ta'ala. It's a great thing. You don't have to make salah all the time. You know what? Sometimes it's as easy as saying, Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim. The pathways to Allah Ta'ala are many. This deen has made it so easy. You can be sitting in your home, you can be driving in your car, you can be doing whatever. As long as you're not engaging in lahu and la'ib and wasting your time, you can use every second to get closer to Allah Ta'ala. So these two words are such that they are what? Habibatani ila Rahman. Allah loves it. So you can be talking a whole lot of rubbish, or you can do something which will incur you the love of Allah Ta'ala. And it is khafifatani ala al-lisan. It will take you 2 seconds to recite these two sentences. Thaqilatani fil mizan. And as much as deeds will be weighed on the day of Qiyamah, these will be weighed, and they have been weighed very, very heavily on the day of Qiyamah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw his grandfather Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam on Mi'raj, and he asked him, convey a message to your people. And your people, this is Ibrahim's people. We are who? We are millata abikum Ibrahim. Huwa sammahum al-Muslimin. We are the nation of Ibrahim. He gave us the name of Muslimin. Why? Because when Allah Ta'ala told him, Aslim, قال أسلمت لرب العالمين. He was told, submit, he submitted without question. That ability to submit without question is what the essence of deen is. But anyway, that person who is the progenitor of this great religion of ours and the progenitor of our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is sending a gift. He's saying, Muhammad, my son, tell your ummah that the land, the earth of Jannah is uncultivated. They should cultivate it. How should they cultivate it? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Subhanallah wa hamdi. Subhanallah. Every tasbih cultivates something in the akhirah. So in these final words, Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi is conveying that while the controversies of the Quran being the kalam makhluk or ghayr makhluk, whether your deeds will be weighed or not be weighed, all of that, despite all of that, together with all of it, over and above all of that, take this message that fill the rest of your life with the dhikr of Allah Ta'ala. Wherever you find the opportunity, say Subhanallah wa bihamdi, say Subhanallah wa azim, say La ilaha illallah. You know, scientists are finding out, I'm sorry, I'm dragging this thing out, but we were looking at what is the reality of matter. People want to find out. So once upon a time, theoretically, they said the atom is the smallest thing that you can find. Well, then we know they split the atom. And inside the atom, they found the what? They found a nucleus. And the nucleus is made up of what? Neutrons, electrons, protons. Some say there are four things in this world. The world is made up of four things. Neutrons, protons, electrons, and borons. That's the other one. We are the borons. Why? We are the borons because we're not engaging enough in the dhikr of Allah Ta'ala. However, then they split those things apart and they find even smaller particles inside there. They find the quarks and they find the photons and they split those apart and eventually they come in string theory. In physics, speak about string theory. In the inside, you find energy that's radiating at a certain, what do you call it? What's the word? Energy at a certain frequency. What did our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tell us? Subhanallah walhamdulillah tamla'ani ma bayna as-samai wal ard. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah, filling heavens and earth. They are discovering these things. Our Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us about it. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. Everything in creation is making the tasbih of Allah. You just don't understand. Let's join the rest of creation in saying Subhanallah wa bihamdi, Subhanallah al-Azim, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Dua.
It's late. And the dua can be long and the dua can be short. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had a sunnah, the dua at the end of the majlis, not a very long dua. But it covers more than just everything that we want to cover. So we make the dua of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Hamdan kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhi wa 'azimi sultanik. Subhanak. La nuhsi thana'an 'alayka anta kama athnayta 'ala nafsik. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تكون لك رضا وله جزاءه وبحقه أداء وأعطه الوسيلة والفضيلة والمقام المحمود الذي وعدته وجزه عنا ما هو أهله وجزه أفضل ما جازيت نبيا عن قومه ورسولا عن أمته وصل على آبائه وإخوانه من الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معصيتك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا متعنا بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقواتنا أبدا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا وانصرنا على من عادانا ولا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا ولا غاية رغبتنا ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا من لا يخافك فينا ولا يرحمنا يا مولانا يا رب العالمين. وصل اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين.